I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is going to talk about the challenges of drug addiction in the family. Adriano Barbeau is the president and one of the founders of the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center. He's been studying Spiritism for the past 11 years. At the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center, he develops and coordinates Spiritist study groups and is a fraternal counselor. Adriano also gives lectures on Spiritism in the New York and tri-state area. Please welcome Adriano Barbeau.
This computer here has no VGA access. But anyway, meanwhile I've been talking to you. I feel very honored and happy to come in here Long Island with these beautiful people that are joining together to help one another on this so important topic, which is suicide, and bringing the topic of drug addiction in the family. Certainly we don't come here as an authority on anything, rather moved by compassion towards those ones that are suffering more than us, are going through so much struggles in life, so that in some way, despite the fact that we are so limited in many ways, we can give a little towards mitigating and helping. We can, excuse ourselves because this limitation and cross our arms and say it's okay. The world, they arrange themselves and they take care of themselves. We all, in some way, like Sucide and the other guys told, can help. It can be very little, but in a way, very little for me sometimes is a lot for somebody else. And when we think about it, helping just one person, it's a lot. One person is one person. It's a lot. And then sometimes we stop trying. When we talk about suicide and drugs, it's so huge, so daunting, that we just say, okay, I'm too little and too small to adventure myself in doing something. I'm intellectually not so bright. My neurons is not so many dendrites, those connections. But with, maybe like me, 2 neurons, like Chiquitapis works some ways to help. And before we go, thank you so much to bring the slides. We're going any further talking about suicide. Because challenges on drugs is a way of suicide as well, that we call indirect suicide, that the person is himself or herself not truly willing to kill themselves, aware of it, but they know that eventually it's destroying their lives and it's indirect suicide that has very terrible consequences for them ongoing their lives and afterlife in the spiritual realm. And Spiritism, in both direct and indirect suicide, is a very fundamental, it's fundamental to help people ongoing these situations. As David Jobs in studying depression and suicide, he brought some diagnoses, some ideas, what the people going through in their lives that have ideas of suicide, of depression. And 3 things he notes that is very important that Spiritism can help He says that people on depression or on suicide risk or that committed suicide, they feel hopeless. They feel hopeless. They think that the negative situations that they are going through will last forever. And this is so interesting when we come into Spiritism. Because Spiritism teaches us very much hope. That nothing, despite the difficult, the level of the affliction, or the trouble that we're going through, depression, sadness, is forever. It can go a long time, but eventually that will end, will give a venue for a better situation in our life. In that way, people having this faith that the bad things will cease in some way, in some point in their lives, here or after that. They won't have no motivation anymore to kill themselves. Because they have hope for the future. They have hope for the future. And in the Spiritism, it's all about hope. I couldn't find in any other philosophy or science. Science has been helping a lot. But as in the Spiritist, is the only philosophy, religion, or science, as you can call it, that brings most hope for the people. And I mean, since the person acquires in some way a little bit of hope, he or she is giving up of the negativity of their lives. And that's what we're trying to bring about. Not only for the people that we are willing to touch, to help, because I consider myself as well very, very vulnerable. I can tell you that I will never cross my mind, willing to kill myself. I don't know tomorrow's struggles that comes to me. You know, the subconscious is still a lot in me. That's, I don't know tomorrow. In that way, by emphasizing hope and trying to, grab on this, I'm preventing myself as well, bringing to myself the certainty that tomorrow when struggles come even deeper, I'll be able to overcome. The other point that he brings on suicide risks and depression is self-hate. Self-hate is very deep on people who commit suicide. In that way, they try to escape through killing themselves through death. And Spiritism, as I believe in any other religion, teaches about forgiveness, about loving one another. And that's where you're going to see here from some slides that I brought in throughout our short talk. And regarding the drug addiction, I brought here a slide showing, the statistic or this graphic here, how much people or in which drugs they are most addicted to. Anyone can see here, that alcohol is, it covers more than 50% of the whole addiction. And as well, it comes in the second, marijuana. And you see many others over there that covers it. And paradoxically saying, those two that covers the graph more is those that are more acceptable among ourselves. And every scholar on studying addiction every sensible person responsible on teaching their kids and their families, they notice that the doorway for a harder addiction is alcohol, is marijuana, for example. It's there where they start. It's light one, is acceptable for majority of people, is even stimulated by some members of the family, more closer to their homes or their friends or in school. Either way, we don't see much work on educating people in the first two, doorway to addiction. They go more to heroin, to cocaine. That is the last percentage of people addicted to them. Why not start or go more emphasis on the light ones? There's many reasons for that we know. It's economic and the market and the social acceptance and so forth. But for us, Spiritists should be different. We have no power to change the government laws about it. But we have power to educate our families, to educate ourselves, to help one person, two persons, the kids that walk hand in hand with our kids. That's the responsibility that we are called to do first in our life. If it reaches the government, the community, it's good. But if not, at least in my home, I have responsibility towards it. And that's where the challenge of drug addiction starts. Because everyone has one family, despite we all know there's people that suppose to have family, but they live with other people that we could call them family. And if the families, if we value families, and then that's there we should start. We should do campaigns, publish this, publish that, work, article, that's all welcome. But that's the cell of society, is the family, as the spirits are telling us. And that's there we call the attentions for today reflection. And that's there mostly we can make the difference. Let's make the difference. Because they go out there and carry on the influences that we are giving to themselves. And I brought other slides here so we can reflect a little more on the teachings that the spirits are bringing us towards addiction. What is addiction? I brought some just definition here so we can reflect real quickly. In the dictionary of Oxford, it says the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, things, or activity. So we have some over here, right? Have some over here, but our emphasis more today is the chemical addiction. But the Spiritism, as we have reflected on today, the addiction on drugs, marijuana, cocaine, heroin, pot, and many others, has moral causes behind it. It's maybe the reflection of other problems. And then we have addiction here for sex, for work, for many and many other things that are triggering me, the person, the individual, to look for the drug. And these points here, for example, is where the family real responsible in caring towards their kids, their members, are starting to educate them. We are never to wait them to show tendency to use alcohol or smoking. No. Because maybe what's going to treat them to use alcohol or drugs is a problem related to sexuality. Is a problem related to shopping. What else? For drugs later on. And that's, if we start thinking on this, we are preventing the teenagers, the kids, the family to go on drugs. Sometimes we think that's just to talk about drugs at home, at school, that will prevent them to go into it. No. Well, they can be aware of the dangers, the consequences, talking about it. It can help. But maybe it's a sexuality problem that drives them crazy to go and use drugs, because they don't find any other means to cope with that problem. And in the family, by observing what's going on with the kids, with the members, we're going to detect the problem. And that's why Spiritism, it's so large in embracing all ages and welcoming them to the Spiritist Center. Because in any age we can be educated, we can be enlightened to go forward. There is this 50 years of work guy, works in addiction. He's a Argentinian guy, Edward Calino. He's very well known around the globe. Because, it was, and it is in some families, the culture of experimentation. Just a little bit doesn't matter of alcohol or smoke. He says that the experiment is one time. One time. That's experiment on, for example, smoke or drink. It's experiments after one dose, little bit of alcohol, is not experiment anymore. It's not experiment, It's addiction already. Some level, it is addiction. So that way, let us see. Well, my teenager, my kid, or me has just one cigarette. Have one. Second one is not experiment anymore. It's addiction. But we sometimes disregard these facts and we are blind for it. Let us see it. He said something so amazing that I never thought of it. He said, for example, so hard that it engraves in our physical body the use of any substance. He says, for example, I'm not a smoker, but at 15 years of age, I decided to experiment one. I don't know how to call it, but he put a cigarette and inhale it so deep and let it go. 65 years later, I never did it anymore, never put a cigarette in my mouth anymore. But 65 years later, after that event, my brain is still remembers and is affected by that smoke. Just a second. And let us imagine here, for the heart addicted person, how hammered their brains, their bodies are. And the perispirit. That's why it's been so hard for the addicted person in any level, especially the chemical ones, to get rid and overcome it. The spirits are telling us that it takes more than one lifetime to overcome the addiction problem. If I'm addicted in this lifetime, and I reincarnate again the next lifetime, and don't get back to the same addicted that's supposed alcohol or marijuana or cocaine, one lifetime I never use it again. And still I am vulnerable. I have to come more than one lifetime, 100 or 80 years, not using it to really overcome it. Let's say here it takes 200 years, 150 years, depending on our effort, to overcome one tendency, one addiction problem. And when we deal with family, whom of us will be, saying that our kids, that we don't bring this tendency from previous life, that we're totally free of risk to fall on the spell of such a horrible thing? We would say, no, my kids, it's okay. They're so good kids. We don't know their best. Why taking the risk? Why? Maybe we could prevent a lot of stuff. And Edward Kalin and many other we could go on, search and study. It's trillion ways better to prevent than work when the problem comes. But what happens is, and especially the drug addiction, our brain, the brain of the addicted, get impaired in many levels depending on the level of the addiction. And they can't think normally anymore because the neurons, all those, showing that Julius showed us, is impaired. The same explanation that we give for a normal person with a normal healthy brain doesn't fit well for them. And then it's not about telling, oh, you should think on God, you should think on the next lifetime and so forth. It's going to help a lot. But it will way harder because they have no way to process the information because the machine, which is our brain, is impaired. And that's why we work a lot on preventing. And we are preventing without knowing, giving hope in the Spiritist Center, teaching about future life and so forth is a prevention for drug addiction. Joanna Jones are telling us this way. The psychogenesis of addiction. In the psychogenesis of addiction, there is a confused, insecure and sometimes rebellious spirits that brings a heavy load of the lives, of past lives, frustration and defiance. That Joanna Jones is telling us that the person addicted brings this from past lives. We don't create addiction, at least in that deep level, by one lifetime. The person can't be born and start being addicted to drugs so deep. He has to bring it from previous lifetime. And the treatment, the therapy, it starts sometimes before reincarnation. The Spiritism are teaching us there is the realm of the spirits that interacts, like our friend in the beginning told us, that interacts a lot and influence each other in every second. In that way, the spirit, by proposing a reincarnation in the family, they are educating themselves. And the family, before started as we have it, kids and marriage, if they are healthy, if they are educated on those things, they are already educating their kids before they go into birth and go on pregnancy and so forth. Who is the ones most susceptible to drugs? Those who are frightened during life. Those who lack any tolerance in relation to their own frustration. Those whose life should always be pleasant and rewarding. Those who are looking for an escape from reality. That's Adriano telling us. I mean, whom of us here has none of that? Can we say that our kids, so innocent, are not carrying this frustration, are not fearing life? It's a lot going on in society. Wars, dispute, competition, a lot of things that they don't tell us, that they're going through, and that's make them and makes us vulnerable and susceptible to the problem of addiction. And by working these topics here, by working fear, by letting them know and locating ourselves and them all together, that life is an ongoing work of effort, transformation, looking always for the better, that nothing is coming from a magical pill like we had before. That's an effort. And as well, we are surrounded by compassionate spirits, compassionate forces that are supporting us along the way to reach our happiness. And then we are preventing suicide, we are preventing drug addiction. Contributing factors that we should reflect a little bit here for family conflicts, absence of dialogue, aggression, lack of affection. So there is a contribution factor for the drug addiction. There should be temptation a lot in the family conflicts. And family conflicts, how do you work family conflicts? Husband and wife, wife and husband, siblings. There's a lot of conflicts that are influencing the kids, the family, in any age to look for drugs. Because their family is being helped. They are not secure enough, for example, to go on to the next step of dialogue, aggression. If our families are experiencing these three topics here, and then it will be easier for us, for the kids, for the teenagers to look on drugs as an escape, as something to help them. That's interesting as well, something that Joanna tells and Eduardo Colleen agrees too. Because the person addicted to drug, he thinks and believes that it's something nice, good for them. It's a value, right? And I mean, how we can convince the person that truly believes in all the power of their soul that that thing is good for them. Despite bringing a lot of bad things for them, they feel it good. That's why it's so difficult to have it as a value. Because sometimes they didn't find any better value at home. There's a lot of conflict, fighting, accusation, no forgiveness, and so forth. And that way they have it as a value. But if they have it at home, a better value, if they are taught, as Spiritists are helping us to see, there are values that we can acquire. The family itself is a great value. And then they have no reason at all to look for any false value that is drug, alcohol, or something as a kind. In other words, let us work on family conflicts. Let us give room for conversation, for dialogue. We always talk in the Spiritist Center because we are not so used on conversation between family to family. But most that I know, especially when they have teenagers, they come and say, they came with such a conversation, I felt so awkward to talk with them. They are talking about sexuality. They are talking about, interesting in other guys. I don't know how to talk with them. They are lazy on doing it. So there is no room for conversation, dialogue, and then there is the conflicts there. And if the family, our homes, are not offering the safe haven, this place of security for them, are you waiting for the school to do it? Are you waiting for the streets to do it? For the corner deli? If we are not, nobody else can do it. They could do something that are doing, but not as effective as we could do in our homes. Inner conflicts, previous life tendencies. So there's the contributing facts. That's our inner problems. Inner problem. And that is something that we all carry in us. Did you ever saw a person, that that has no inner problem? I never saw one. Even the greatest men that came on earth, in a while they complain about something. They said about that they have some difficulty, except for Jesus. In that way, anyone around us in some way vulnerable to something as addiction. And by having this at mind, let us put our hands on and working in us to solve our inner conflicts, as the Spiritist teaches us, and in helping whomever are around us, be it our kids, our sons, daughters, brothers and sisters, whomever are closest to us, and expanding. And disconnect influences, enemies of past lives, and like-minded spirits. So there is this huge influence from the spiritual realm. We leave links from previous life. That spirits that we have known each other, and unfortunately we made them as enemies of ours. And then there's those other ones they have a similar characteristics, moral tendencies that we have there. We are attracting those energies towards ourselves. And despite the fact we are vulnerable, we are fragile, alone, just alone. Let us imagine now adding up more fragile ill-minded spirits out in the spiritual world joining us. And then it will be even harder for us and more difficult to us to overcome and cope with what we came to do on earth. That's why Jesus said, pray and watch. Pray and watch. And the kids are coming to the Spiritist Center. The families are coming to the Spiritist Center. We are talking about it, but it seems like it never clicks. The person never said, oh, wow, that's it. Yeah, there is this influence. We know it intellectually, but inwardly, sometimes we feel that they don't are conscious and aware of that problem, of that influence. And that's where I have seen a lot of like balanced family for a while going downhill to a very disturbed situations. Drug addiction, suicide, imprisonment, arresting kids because this or that. Suddenly, because they never took it seriously to their lives, to teach their children for it. And in that way, the Spiritist Center helps. Because the kids, sometimes they just come, they have no teachings class for them, but they are having passes. The discarnate, ill-minded with them are being, treated as well. And the load of that bad energy, they are propelling them to look for sometimes an alcohol or pill or drug is less. And the effectiveness of prayer are more, powerful on their spirit. And yet, even the Spiritist Center that we know is so deep, we have to work a lot more to bring this awareness effective to our centers. It's not only to the Spiritist Centers societies, it's as well in other churches. We have seen, for example, it's not a criticism in anything, it's just that we see, and it's normal for a while. The kids, this less attended sometimes, the classes for them, and the physical part of the Spiritist Center is the smallest part of the Spiritist Center dedicated for the kids. We always say, okay, the kids go for the salinha, the little room, the small room, despite sometimes there's a lot more kids in the little room than the adults in a big room like this. It's not a Spiritist Center. Once I went to work in a big temple of other religion, and we were supposed to build a little room for the kids. But I tell you, that temple was as big as this hotel here. A big for 250 people, the audience there. And the cafeteria itself were like as big as this here in the next room. All these for the adults. And they are building like a corner, like this, nearby the boiler rooms and so forth for the kids. And I thought, oh my God, it's not the Spiritist Center only. See, that's something that we should think about. Therapy for addiction, preventive, starts in childhood, formation of healthy habits. It starts there in pregnancy. And pregnancy, as the Spiritists are now going to help the mother, the father. Meanwhile, the kid inside the womb of mother is growing, but the Spirit is aware. In emergency, the physical, emotional, and spiritual. So there is this emergency work as well. We need the pills. We need the medication for the brain to work properly, to help the person think more rationally, measure things out, the consequences for their lives. In that way they can have the spiritual.
I think there's some in the kitchen. Right?
Because sometimes we think, okay, go to the Spiritist Center, have passes into obsession. Well, we're going to help a lot, but I tell you, he or she needs the medication. Only the spiritual and the fast and so forth won't resolve the problem. Sometimes it's rather better have the medication only than the Spiritist Center, because the brain is so damaged. The physical need is way more at that particular moment than a preaching of the gospel. He wouldn't absorb it at that moment. So in that way, the Spiritism is always the complement. Go for the doctor, for the emergency, physically, and then go for the emotional, which is a psychotherapist, to help, a counselor to help the family. And all these are joining forces. Nobody, no institution, no science at all are claiming to have the power to solve the problems alone. We have to join all things that we have at hand if we are willing to win over the difficulties of drug addictions in our lives. Just to see my time. How many minutes I still have?
15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll make most of it. Thank you, Luz. No doubt, education from the early age is the most valuable preventive therapeutic resource, as it is safer to avoid dependence than to leave its obscure enclosure. The moral education at home is the most proper resource against the contamination of such a pandemic problem. Drug addiction, by providing an emotional haven and stimulating those moral treasures that will grant them the balance necessary to face their lives, struggle. So, all throughout the literature of Spiritism emphasizes to educate from the early age. In Kardec's books as well, any serious Spiritist book are emphasizing the need to start in early age. Because we know that we come from past lives. And our past lives wasn't easy going. We had differences to solve. We bring our heart filled with sometimes guilt, regret. Sometimes we bring hate. Sometimes people, the spirits are kind of forced to reincarnate. And they bring the hate, the rebelliousness. And that way, I think, we Spiritist families are to make our families, the home, this temple, in which are to receive the sons and daughters of God. That the spirits are telling us we are the cooperators, the helpers of God, to care for each other of us. We are truly family, one family only, one family. We have a blood family because it's need for reincarnation and so forth, but we have one Father, which is God. And whomever we receive in our family, and then they are truly our family. Sometimes they are not truly related to me, to my family from previous lives. But we willingly are offering cozy nest of our home to receive the evil spirit that brings the troubled mind from the past, grief that they can't stand anymore in the spiritual world. And then we offer them our loving arms for them. But sadly, it's to bring awareness for us. We are not like seeing, at least in a more global scale, the family is valued as it could be. They bring up the kids like in indifference. They are like addicted sometimes to the work and forgetting the kids. And they let them, okay, I'll give you whatever you need in regard and material things. But you won't have me. You won't have my affection. And there is this truly hard indifference for the growing up of our kids. Maybe that's why we see so much suicide, the persons among kids, among teenagers. The addictions are so much in there. Because truly, it's the first years of the Spirit on earth. They are still adapting to start to gain power, balance, to face the struggles in life. And then they come to our family to have our support, our teachings and so forth in regard to moral values. And they are not having it. And the insecurities that they brought with themselves are growing even more. Because unconsciously they are aware of it. And they go and grow troubled and go for the drugs. The researchers are telling us the younger the person gets to drugs, alcohol, smoking, anything, any addiction towards chemical, the earlier he gets into it, the more difficult it is to overcome it. A year makes a difference in overcome the drug addiction. For example, 15 years old has less chance to overcome addiction than a 16 years old, than a 17 years old, and so forth. Why? Because the formation of the body is not yet done completely in childhood, in the teenager time. That's why when the person goes to addiction later in life, that's supposed 25 years, 28 years, when the body itself is totally or most completely formated, it's easier for them, it has more success on overcoming the drug addiction. And that's why we see as well less addiction in later life of the individual. And that's why here I think that it's so appropriate in a family on the teenager time, because the risks are more, the consequences could ease much difficult to overcome, and it's something for us to reflect on. And the law of love, instincts, sentiments, and instincts, sensations, and sentiments. We start as the spiritual teachings. We're in the evolution process, where we're growing step by step by all the experiences that we have, and we start having instincts, the sensations, and the sentiments. We are by now supposed to be sentiments, less sensation. But the look for the drugs are the level of sensation. It brings the sensation because we are attached more to the sensation. We have disregarded and forgotten for a while the sentiments, the sublimation of our emotions for the sentiment. And then we are suffering dramatically the consequences of it, because our hospitals, our families is being so troubled. I mean, in my surrounding, in my neighborhood, I don't know in here, but there in Mount Vernon, there's a lot of difficulty in drugs. Our families, it doesn't matter what nationality they're coming from. Brazilians, I know a lot on drugs. I know the Americans, I know all the countries are facing this difficulty. Because that's here, the sentiment in some way is forgotten. And Spiritists focus on the sentiment, working there inwardly in the soul. In the book Renunciation by Emmanuel, which I was reminded by a person whom I have given a book, Renunciation. After one day that I have given her a book, I asked her how she is doing with the book. And she said, oh, this book is so perfect for me. Because there in the introduction, Emmanuel is telling the reader that the book is written for the person who wants to see the world through the heart and the sentiment. And so, well, yeah, I have read that many times, I have noticed it. That's this, because we are not, unfortunately, but that's why we are in the Spiritist Center looking for it, to see the world and work our sentiments. And development of love, self-love, love for neighbor, and love for God. And then we start, as we have seen today in many other lectures that we have in Spiritism, self-love. Whom of us that loves truly ourselves, and whom on the world that loves themselves would go for suicide, would go for drugs, or any other harm situation? No, nobody. Nobody would cause any hurt for nobody if we love ourselves. I wouldn't hurt myself, and I wouldn't hurt nobody else. If we loved ourselves, our neighbor would be loved as well. We wouldn't be doing the wars, attacking nobody, because that's against the law of love, truly against. Nothing could say otherwise. And then love for God. And nobody can love God with which not loving the neighbor. And that's the steps we go. It's like 3 steps. First, instincts, sensations, sentiments. Here we have self-love, love for the neighbor, and love for God. And if we love God, and then we should love our neighbor. And if we, like we are here in this room, despite we are going through our struggles, I'm sure that everyone have its own struggles, problems, health problems of any kind. But we are in a much better situation than trillions of people. And then we can make a little part on helping others, because we already are entitled at least to say that we love our neighbor in some way. Everything is possible for the one who has faith. And faith is something so important. Our religion, even science, is talking about faith. In other words, in another way, they're talking about faith. Without faith, that's where we are downhill. And usually we are conversation in school, in work. We are talking about faith, right? Because it's not right to talk about faith. It's not socially accepted. But truly what's lacking now? It's not because the people are not accepting it. Because sometimes it's not really what they want is somebody to open a conversation, a dialogue, in which comes a topic about faith, believing in better future, and no better than us, in a way of knowledge that we have in Spiritism, can talk about faith. The rational faith, the faith which the vital principle is hope. We can go on helping a lot. We can be a therapist 24 hours a day. Because everyone that comes to us in some way are sick, and we are in some way sick too. And if we are truly like bringing out of us what we already have, and then surely by the end of our life we can count how many people have benefited from the way, if we are truly putting our effort to bring the light and the faith we have acquired in Spiritism. And that's the end, but it's not the end. Because we are keeping the faith. We are keeping the faith that never are to die, never is to die. Because truly, who of us on earth doesn't want to have faith? People sometimes ask us how we're going to attract people for Spiritism. How we're going to bring Spiritism for people. How the Americans, Japanese, Vietnamese are coming to Spiritism. But I think the best ever way is through love. No matter how we are talking, through scientific way, philosophical, religious way. I don't know nobody that ever have experienced love that didn't like. They can come to a gathering like this, and they could have not liked the lecture, the wording, but if they have experienced love from us, they wouldn't care how we put the words for them, how we put the explanation, the techniques and so forth. And they will certainly like, and they will certainly will come back. And that's where we're going to touch most people, because that's why there's the law of love. And I think that's through love, and I believe through the teachings of the Spirit, that through love there will truly be overcoming suicide, drug addiction, any other problems that we go through on earth for a while. Because no longer for now, this topic here wouldn't be necessary to talk anymore, because we have overcome it. Thank you.